Located in the Santa Ynez Valley 2.5 hours northwest of Los Angeles, sits one of the most iconic properties of the 1990s and early 2000s. The Neverland Ranch, famous for its longtime owner, king of pop and musical legend Michael Jackson, and his child paradise tastes, has had quite a journey with the pop star, and questions have surrounded the property's future since his sudden death in 2009. Join me today as we take a look at the once Jackson Dreamland and uncover what exactly has been the state of the property since Jackson's death. My name is Lee Brees, and this is Modern Ruins, Episode 2.
Welcome to Neverland, the most opulent pleasure dome in America, a surreal emerald in the midst of dry California scrub, the place where Michael Jackson lives out all his private fantasies.
Neverland Ranch started as part of the 48,000-acre La Laguna Rancho, which was a Mexican land grant dating back to the early 1800s, when the area was under the control of the Mexican government. Fast forward 150 years later, the land was in the hands of part founder of Crocker Bank, Robert Easton, who used the vast area of land mainly as a cattle ranch with some warehouses and a small factory, referring to a smaller 2,588-acre area as Zacaladeros Ranch. In 1977, renowned developer William Bone, known at the time for the PGA West Resort in Palm Springs and many elaborate condo developments, acquired the Zacaladeros Ranch from Easton's estate. Bone took note of the many live oak and sycamore trees and the ranch's proximity to the California coast that made the entire Santa Ynez Valley a popular location for vineyards due to the moist soil, renaming it to Sycamore Valley Ranch with plans to construct a personal home for him and his family. The family then moved into a small ranch house on the property, while Bone researched and developed his idea for what the future design of the sprawling ranch should be. Bone then turned over a 10-page list of wants to lead architect Robert Aldivers, with whom he spent more than 2 years designing the final concept for the project, with others being credited such as Thomas A. Stone as the chief landscape architect. The final plan was to construct a 12,500 square foot Normandy-style home with several other structures and features on the property, such as elaborate gardens, 4-acre lake with waterfall, a stone bridge, clubhouse, and tennis court. The main house would feature 6 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms, including a 2-story master suite with 2 baths attached and a private loft. Other amenities included a formal dining room, living room, kitchen and breakfast room, staff quarters, library, and conference room. Bone recruited skilled craftsmen and artisans from all over the United States to work on his personal pride project. Construction was complete in 1982, with Bone taking great pride in the finished product, saying, "I achieved here all the things I wanted to do in my business but could not." With construction of a clubhouse, Bone had briefly considered converting the property into a country club, but ultimately decided to list the property instead after its completion. Around the same time, rising American pop star Michael Jackson was in London staying with Paul McCartney and his wife Linda, recording a song he had written for the two, Say, Say, Say. This was also the time Paul McCartney showed Michael a booklet of all the songs to which he owned the publishing rights, which was helping him financially. And this conversation would later lead Michael to purchase ATV Music Publishing a few years later, which owned the rights to 251 Beatles songs. After recording was complete, the two headed back to the US to film the music video in California. Scenes were shot in Los Alamos, which is very close to Sycamore Valley Ranch. The McCartneys had elected to stay there during filming, and Paul invited Michael to hang out upon occasion at the newly constructed property. During these visits, Michael quickly fell in love with the ranch, expressing sincere interest in owning the property. At the time, Michael was in the middle of a complete rebuild of his Havenhurst house, to which Michael's father had purchased after brief stints in hotels and a rented house in Beverly Hills since the Jackson family's move from Gary, Indiana, when Michael was only around 11 years old. The original house was demolished, and Michael constructed a brand new Tudor-style home for his family, dividing ownership between himself, his mother, and his father. Only your architect or interior design friend can tell you the difference between the Normandy style and Tudor style. They are basically the same. The home had several Disney-inspired elements and housed Michael's menagerie on the 1-acre property. This would prove to be a model for Michael's dream home he would purchase only a few years later. In 1988, Sycamore Valley Ranch had been listed for several years with an asking price of $32 million. Official numbers cannot be confirmed, but it is believed that Jackson purchased the property for an amount slightly less than that, purchasing the property through a trust with his lawyer, John Branca, and his accountant, Marshall Gelfand, acting as trustees to protect Jackson's privacy, until a few months later when Jackson became the sole owner of the property in April 1988. Jackson would then rename the little-known Sycamore Valley Ranch to Neverland Ranch, after the fantasy island in Peter Pan, a place where tomorrow never comes. Work began immediately to adapt the property to Jackson's likeness, with only slight alterations done to the main house, namely adding Jackson's personal touches as the house came fully furnished. Given Jackson's early success in life, he spent most of his childhood traveling and in the recording studio. So his idea for both the Havenhurst house and Neverland was to construct a fantasy world for an ideal childhood that he didn't have. Or perhaps hadn't had yet, if you look at it that way. And perhaps also to satisfy his peculiar interest in children. At Neverland, he spent $35 million to bring that fantasy land into reality, constructing a zoo for his menagerie of elephants, giraffes, chimpanzees, crocodiles, bears, llamas, snakes, a reptile house, and exotic birds, which were short-lived due to the noise they'd make during mating season. Also added was a 50-seat theater house and a small theme park with all kinds of carnival rides. The park took almost a decade to reach the level many remember it as, with Jackson purchasing 18 rides between 1990 and 1997. All of this was surrounded by a railroad that would carry you to various parts of the property, beginning and ending at the Catherine train station, named for Jackson's mother. The station was largely decorative, but did feature some rooms and was complete with a floral clock, making the train station one of the most iconic images of the property. Even with only a few of the additions complete, Jackson began showcasing his dreamland to the world immediately. The ranch was the location for the wedding of Elizabeth Taylor and Larry Fortescue in 1991, and Jackson, who rarely gave formal interviews, did a live interview with Oprah Winfrey from Neverland in 1993. Jackson would also host countless fundraisers and invite terminally ill children to spend a day at the ranch. Michael's passion to share Neverland with other children would also lead him to host a World Children's Congress with his then-wife Lisa Marie Presley in 1995. It was a 3-day seminar on issues facing kids around the globe, in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the United Nations. This was all occurring while Jackson faced civil lawsuits of alleged improper behavior with minors, and while we won't delve into that in this video, we'll see later how these accusations would go on to impact the final fate of Neverland Ranch. By 2000, Neverland had reached its final form and peak. The ranch now featured an arcade room full of all kinds of video and arcade-style games at the time, and Michael Jackson's immense art collection was now displayed throughout. The 3 guest houses were set up in a traditional hotel style with numbered rooms. The amusement park was now complete, featuring 4 zippers, a Sea Dragon pirate ship ride, Wipeout, Octopus, Turtle Train, Lolly Swing, Zombie Balloon, Dumbos, Drago, Wave Swinger, Super Slide, Roller Coaster, Bumper Car House, and iconic Ferris Wheel and Carousel. The ranch now featured 22 main structures, and the annual cost to maintain it all was between $5 and $6 million, including a $1 million payroll for Neverland's 120 full-time staff. In 2003, criminal charges were filed against Jackson for multiple counts of child molestation, after a documentary had been released showing Jackson holding hands with a minor and he discussing sleeping with the boy. Neverland Ranch became a central part of the investigation as being the main location where the abuse took place. On the morning of November 20th, 2003, the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department showed up to Neverland with a search warrant after a preliminary investigation had been done by the Los Angeles Department of Child and Family Services. Jackson and his family weren't at the ranch at the time as they were in Las Vegas for the shooting of Michael's music video for One More Chance. The 70 officers were looking for any evidence of child molestation and confiscated 16 computer hard drives and found several books in the main house containing images of nude or semi-nude young males, including several in Jackson's personal safe. Because the books were not illegal to own, they were dismissed as credible evidence in the trial. Officers also confirmed, and a staff member would later testify in trial, that Jackson's master suite had a second room built into the walk-in closet, where alleged abuse had taken place. It was disclosed in the property description as an intentional safe room in case of an emergency. During the time of the trial, rumors were also surfacing about Jackson being in significant financial trouble, but he denied these claims as part of a broader smear campaign associated with the trial. On June 15, 2005, Jackson would be acquitted of all charges and say that the trial was the lowest point in his life. Despite the acquittal, Jackson vowed he would never return again to Neverland Ranch, as he felt the police officers had violated the property and therefore Jackson no longer considered Neverland a home. Regardless of whether this was true, it wouldn't be long before maintaining Neverland was no longer financially possible. After the trial, Jackson had gone into reclusion in Bahrain, where family members say they would have sent Michael had he been convicted. It was at this time that it was made public how much the King of Pop was struggling financially. By April 2006, Jackson was nearly $300 million in debt, mainly due to his lifestyle as he was spending over $2 million per month. Bank of America had sold all of the loans they had with Jackson to Fortress Investments, an investment company that buys distressed loans. Part of Jackson's stake in various music catalogs that he owned the rights to were used as collateral for the new loan repayment agreement with Fortress Investments. Jackson continued to own Neverland Ranch, but to save cash, the property was permanently closed. All the staff were let go, Jackson owing more than $169,000 in back wages at the time of the closure. The childhood fantasy land created by the most famous person in the world now sat abandoned, with its best days gone by, and the dismantling of Jackson's dream property had begun. Neverland's ownership and future were now in jeopardy due to the pop star's continuing financial struggles. Jackson's debt issues would continue to mount as foreclosure proceedings had begun on the ranch in October 2007. In February 2008, Jackson was notified by the property's title company that unless he paid the $24.5 million owed on the ranch within 30 days, the property would go up for public auction, where all of his belongings at Neverland would be sold, as Jackson owed 3 months in arrears, which is debt on missed debt payments. Michael Jackson's lawyer, L. Londell McMillan, was able to save Jackson's ownership of the ranch by striking an undisclosed deal with his debt owner, Fortress Investments. A second foreclosure auction was threatened later in May, which was also canceled after Colony Capital, another investment company, purchased Jackson's defaulted loan for $22.5 million. Jackson was so desperate at this point that he had planned to sell his entire private collection of over 1,000 records and personal memorabilia through Julian's auction house, but canceled the auction the night before as he was able to raise nearly $300 million from ticket pre-sales for his This Is It concert series in London. In November 2008, the official title for the property was transferred from Jackson to Sycamore Valley Ranch Company, LLC, and it was at this point that significant activity began occurring at the abandoned ranch. Reports began coming in from neighbors that they had seen carnival rides loaded on semis and being trucked away from the Neverland Ranch, and by 2009, all the rides were gone, and so were all the animals in the zoo area. Jackson had given approval to his veterinarians to determine where all the animals would go, including Bubbles the chimp, still alive by the way, who ended up in an animal sanctuary in Florida. All the rides had been purchased by various amusement ride companies. Some of the rides began popping up at county and state fairs across the West Coast, with a few of them stating their Neverland origins. The Ferris Wheel was purchased by Archway Amusements out of Imperial, Missouri, who began taking the iconic ride across the Midwest. Other rides received permanent homes, such as the Dragon Wagon Kiddie Coaster at Coney Island, the Sea Dragon Swinging Ship Ride at Beach Bend Park in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and the Bumper Car House at the California State Fair. The train station and tracks remained on the ranch. At this point, Jackson was no longer the majority owner of the ranch, and his portion remained represented by his lawyer. All furnishings and parts of Jackson's elaborate collections had been sent to an auction house to raise funds to cover its debts. Colony Capital wanted to sell the property in its entirety, including the portion owned by Jackson, saying keeping the property subdivided would destroy it. For the next 8 months, developments on Neverland's future remained dormant until the sudden death of Michael Jackson in June 2009 from an overdose of sedatives given to him by his doctor, which a future trial would render a homicide. Jackson's will, written in 2002, turned over all of his possessions, including the Neverland Ranch, to the Jackson Family Trust. Given Jackson's sudden death, speculation began immediately that he would be buried at the Neverland Ranch, which would have been the most formative final resting place for the star, despite his final take on the property. Speculation continued as it was thought that Neverland would be turned into a pilgrimage site for fans, similar to Graceland for the late Elvis Presley. Once again, reality aside, a very formidable final chapter to both Jackson's and Neverland's legacy. However, Joe Jackson, Michael Jackson's father, denied these reports, with local officials saying that the property's owners would have to go through a lengthy permitting process with Santa Barbara County in the state of California to have the site legally changed to a cemetery. Darn, government strikes again. The property's remote location would also prove to be a challenge for both this idea or any future sale of the property. Jackson would be buried at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Just 3 days after his brother's death, Jermaine Jackson took NBC's Matt Lauer on a tour of the idle main house as the future of the ranch remained out of the family's control. Neverland continued to be abandoned for several years until Colony Capital began undertaking extensive renovations on the property in preparation for the sale of the ranch. There were some minor efforts to keep the ranch. Lady Gaga saying she would invest in the property to help Michael's kids retain ownership. Kanye West saying he would buy it for his wife Kim Kardashian, who celebrated her 14th birthday at the ranch, but nothing happened. A California lawmaker even suggested converting the ranch into a state park, but at the time, the state of California was facing tens of billions of dollars in budget deficits, and Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger at that time was suggesting closing state parks and selling state landmarks to raise cash. So putting up hundreds of millions of dollars to buy the ranch wasn't going to be possible even if the idea got traction. In May 2015, Colony Capital announced it was selling the iconic ranch with a listing price of $100 million, returning it to the prior name of Sycamore Valley Ranch, attempting to distance the property from its prominent main resident. Jermaine Jackson wrote an open letter to Colony Capital pleading with them to reverse their decision to sell the property. A year later, the property was listed with Sotheby's International Realty, an international luxury real estate auction house, with the asking price still set at $100 million. Reports said that Colony Capital was looking for a buyer who wasn't going to convert the property into a Michael Jackson museum. Another year went by, and the property's price was reduced to $67 million as Colony Capital continued to maintain the property. After failure to find a buyer, Coldwell Banker was selected as the new realty agent, with the price remaining at $67 million throughout 2018. The following year, a documentary film called Leaving Neverland was released that featured two boys who are now into late adulthood, who tell their stories of ongoing relationships and abuse by Jackson as children, including graphic depictions of several instances at the Neverland Ranch. The day before the film's release, the listing price was dropped by more than 50% to $31 million. It would be almost another 2 years later when in December 2020, it was announced that the ranch had finally sold to former family friend and investment billionaire Ron Burkle. He had purchased the iconic ranch for only $22 million, almost 1/5 of the original asking price, and likely less than what Michael Jackson had purchased for in nominal dollars. Burkle was looking at another piece of land in the area from the air and noticed the dormant Neverland Ranch, calling the CEO of Colony Capital, who had delisted the property at that point. He has stated that he has little interest in the property and that he purchased it as a land banking opportunity, which in the United States is buying and holding large amounts of land until the market commands a significant price when the land is sold for future development. Despite these claims, as of writing this 5 months after the sale, several permits have been issued to Remember LLC, a suspected company of Ron Burkle. Several photos show construction on many main structures, and a brief drone video posted to YouTube, brief due to the increased security at the ranch, showed that all asphalt roadways on the ranch had been repaved. There was also a report of carnival rides being hauled into the Neverland Ranch, with this photo posted on Twitter on March 6, 2021, being the only evidence to currently exist. Google Maps has also labeled parts of the ranch, as before, the ranch itself wasn't even labeled on Google Maps. Now we just have to sit and wait for Google Maps to update its satellite imagery. While this isn't the ending fans were hoping for, it's sort of a continuation of the idle state the ranch currently sits in, with more chapters of the property yet to be written. It was revealed after Jackson's death that he intended to buy another mansion in Las Vegas that he would call Wonderland after his concert series in London, and given Jackson's financial standing, the sale of Neverland was probable to say the least. We can wonder about what Jackson would have done with the property, but we'll just have to wait and see what Ron Burkle has in store for the future of the iconic Neverland Ranch. And on that note, thank you for watching. Subscribe to Labrise TV for more Modern Ruins content.